Alabama takes a rare trip up to Madison, Wisconsin to take on Luke Fickell's Badgers. They are a 16-point favorite going into this game. ESPN's FPI Football Power Index gives them a 92% chance of winning this thing. For Alabama, you have an elite ground game. You're averaging 6 yards per carry, 264 rushing yards per game. You got Jam Miller, Justice Haynes. These are really phenomenal running backs. And this is probably the most talent that Bama has had in a running back room since they had Jahmyr Gibbs. Both of these dudes have incredible vision, great contact balance, and Jalen Milroe, with his athleticism, he also makes Alabama's rushing attack one of the best in college football. Wisconsin, they haven't looked good against Western Michigan and South Dakota in their first 2 games. They did win those games, but style points do matter. And when you watch those performances, they weren't extremely dominant on the defensive end of things. Their defense did their part and helping them get big stops in the second half, but offensively, they were less to be desired. And when you're going up against an Alabama offense that has the ability to run the football, I question with how Wisconsin's defense looked in these last 2 weeks if they're going to be able to slow down this rushing attack. Because if they can, you love their chances of pulling off this upset. Jalen Milroe, as talented as he is with the ball in his hands, with how strong of an arm he has, and with how accurately he's able to throw the deep ball, it makes this offense really tough to stop. But where you can get Alabama's offense in trouble is when you can take away the big plays in the deep passing game, and you can slow down that rushing attack, and you force Jalen Milroe to have to beat you by throwing the football in the short middle areas of the field. That's not Jalen Milroe's strength. He's not a quarterback that's just going to pick apart your defense like a Garrett Nussmeier or a Jackson Dart. He doesn't really have it up here yet. He's still working on that. And with this being fairly early into the season, and that Alabama has a lot of explosive wide receivers, like they got this true freshman wideout named Ryan Williams, who's only 17 years old. He has 3 touchdowns off 6 receptions, and he's averaging over 30 yards per catch. If you can limit the big plays that Alabama can generate downfield in this vertical passing game, you got a really good chance of being able to keep this a one-possession game for the majority of this matchup. Alabama is not a team that can just consistently pick apart your defense by throwing the football, because Jalen Milroe isn't as accurate as he is throwing the football downfield when he's asked to throw the football in the short intermediate areas of this field. Wisconsin has enough talent defensively where their secondary, they can hang around and be able to limit those explosive plays that this wide receiving core can generate. Their secondary isn't bad. Their defense isn't bad. From a talent standpoint, I like what Wisconsin has. They got a couple of nice pass rushers. They got a couple of solid corners and solid guys on the back end of that secondary. It just all comes down to if you can make Jalen Milroe beat you by having to be an accurate quarterback in between the numbers. That's where he struggles at. For Wisconsin offensively, you're going up against a really powerful defensive line. Alabama's D-line, they're really strong, they're really physical, but Wisconsin normally always has a pretty good offensive line. And I feel the best part of the country to get good offensive line from comes from where Wisconsin is. Up there in that part of the country, it's cold outside. You got the offensive linemen that listen to AC/DC. They're outside, not working in the gym, but they're doing workouts in the woods, getting splinters on their hands because they're pushing logs around. Wisconsin offensively, with their offensive line, I think they can be able to handle themselves up front against Alabama's D-line. And Alabama, it's not like they're going up against a Wisconsin team that's lacking playmakers. They got some pretty good running backs and some pretty good wide receivers that are pretty good after the catch. All you need is for Tyler Van Dyke to be able to get the ball in these wide receivers' hands and these running backs' hands when they're coming out of the backfield, because Tyler Van Dyke has been really inconsistent throughout his collegiate career. And I'm a Miami fan, so I'm pretty familiar with the kind of player that Tyler Van Dyke is. When he's on, you're going to be good enough to win the majority of your games. And if he has a game where he starts out hot against Alabama, you love your chances of pulling off the upset, because that's the only way this is going to happen. You're going to need Tyler Van Dyke to be on his A game. He has a good arm. He makes pretty good decisions with the football when you get him in rhythm early. So look for Luke Fickell and his coaching staff to try to ease Tyler Van Dyke into this game. They haven't really had to ask him to do too much against Western Michigan and South Dakota, but he didn't really look too great in those games. Well, they're going to need him to look great against Bama, because this is not going to be a game that you're going to win without asking Tyler Van Dyke to throw the football more than 30-plus times. So you're going to need him to get in rhythm early so he can have that confidence moving forward from the first quarter all throughout the final 15 minutes of this game. Now, ultimately, when you think about these two teams and you think about these two programs, Wisconsin has always been one of those programs where, at their best, they're a consistent 10-win program. But with Luke Fickell, you're hoping that you can get into the college football playoffs with it now being expanded to 12 teams, and that you can have the ability to compete for a national championship every 2-3 years, because Wisconsin isn't one of those teams that consistently recruits good enough to be able to sustain having a 10-win season. But with what they have this year, you know, you got a pretty experienced defense. You return 71% of your defensive production from last year. Your offense has some pretty talented skill position guys. As long as you can get some competent quarterback play out of Tyler Van Dyke, you got a chance to hang around in the majority of games that you have in your schedule. But it's going to be hard for you to hang around in this game against Alabama with just how dynamic their run game is and how good their offensive line is. And I don't think Wisconsin has enough talent to be able to hang around with this Crimson Tide team, especially when you got Kalen DeBoer as the head coach. So I'm going to take Alabama to win this game outright, and I'm going to take them to cover that -16 spread that they're favored to win by. Give me the Tide. 34-14 is my final score prediction for this game.